Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 380 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron. So thrilled that you are here today as we are talking to Kitty Zeldis. And this was such a fun interview. We're talking about using our senses in our writing, and we're also talking about failing to sell a book and lessons learned and following advice. So please do stick around for that short intro today, as I am still on the road traveling in the States. I hope that as you listen, I am hanging out in my sister's backyard and that we are singing some songs, and maybe we're singing California Stars, which is guaranteed to make me cry when we do it in 3-part harmony. We did talk about hiring the same guitarist, accompanist as we hired last time to help us out. And I hope that we do that because my heart will not be more full than singing with them. I hope that as you listen to this, you are getting some of your own writing done. I hope that I'm getting some of my own writing done as we are traveling. However, maybe not. Maybe not. I have considered this time actually trying to work because I am on deadline. I don't normally work when I'm traveling, but last year, honestly, it was so stressful for me, the trip to the States. I overbooked myself in an introvert's nightmare. And I'm not doing that this time. I'm trying really, really hard not to. And I am thinking that dipping into my own book every day might help ground me. So I am thinking about experimenting with that. And perhaps right now, I'm not singing with my sisters. Perhaps I'm at a cafe somewhere working on my book. We'll see. I will let you know when I come home how it went. But yes, I hope that you're getting your own writing done. I hope that you are considering joining 90 Days to Done, RachelHerron.com/90 in order to write your book or finish your book. We start in September, so please come check that out if you are at all interested. If it has been piquing your interest, if it has been nagging you that perhaps Rachel's help might get you over the finish line, it will. I can. It's what I do best, honestly. So please go check that out if you would like to. And now let's just jump into the interview. Here is Kitty's bio. Born in Chadera, Israel, Kitty Zeldis is the pseudonym for an award-winning author of 9 novels and over 35 books for children. Her essays, articles, and short fiction have been published in many national and literary publications. She is also the fiction editor of Lilith magazine. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, and The Dressmakers of Prospect Heights is her most recent novel. Please ignore some of the technical difficulties. We have a little bit of a problem with the sound at the very beginning when a phone is ringing and continues to ring, but it does get better. And it's just such a fun interview. So please stick around for that. And here we go. Well, I could not be more pleased to welcome you to the show. Hello, will you please share your name and pronouns with us?
I'm Kitty Zeldis, she, her.
Thank you. You wrote a book called you've written a lot of books, but this book is called The Dressmakers of Prospect Heights, and I loved it. I absolutely adored it. My agent Susanna sent it to me, or maybe I got it from your publicist. That's probably it. And I have to admit to you, Kitty, that I start a lot of books for this show because publicists send them to me, and I don't finish them all because I don't need to finish a book that I'm not passionate about. And I loved your book. I just fell right
Thank you.
into it.
Thank you so much.
But at the end of the show, we'll talk about what the book was about. But I have to say that your deep dive into emotion and connection of female characters really, really moved me. So we will talk about that. But for now, since the show is about the process of writing, can you tell us what is your process? When and where and how do you get it all done?
What I've thought about is the less time you have, the more you make of it.
Mm,
And when I had very small children and I had the idea, of course, somebody's calling. No, I just put it in the other room so we don't have to listen to it.
that's all right. We
It's
do
all
real life
spam.
on this show.
It's all spam anyway. Like
Exactly.
that's all I get on that number. Um, when I had these small children, I had an idea for a novel, and it was the first novel that I was going to publish. I didn't know that yet. And I thought, how am I going to write this? Like, I'm going to have to wait until they're 18 and off at college. And then I realized, no, there would be 5 days a week. They would be in school from 9 to 3. And those were the times that I wrote. I didn't do anything else. I mean, I'd go to the bathroom, I'd eat lunch, but like I didn't go out. I didn't make plans. I didn't lounge around. I didn't exercise then. Like that was the writing time. Because I thought that these children of mine who I wanted and I brought into the world deserved a mother who didn't say what when they, asked her a question. Like
Mhm.
I didn't want to be interrupted. So, and I realized that if I did that, and I committed to 2 pages a day, 5 days a week, even someone with my very limited mathematical skills would understand that at the end of the week I would have 10 pages, and at the end of the month I'd have 40 pages. And I wrote a novel that way, and that
Mm.
was really good. Now I have to say that I am like less tethered. My children are grown up. They don't live here. My husband is ill and he doesn't live with me anymore. I had to move him to other living. So I'm really by myself, except with this little dog who may or may not emerge. So in a funny way, I have to like impose limits on myself. Otherwise, like the day is just open and I can just do anything and then you don't get writing done. So I do try to treat it like a job. I get up, I have coffee, I try to exercise a little bit, and then I get to writing. And it's like a daytime thing. I do it during the day. I do break for lunch to take the dog out. I stop maybe around 5. If I'm deep into something, I might look over what I've written in the evening, but I don't do new writing in the evening generally.
Do
I
you
I
still
should
give yourself a goal, like a word count or a page goal, or do you kind of is it more organic now?
No, you're right. I should have said that. It's not so much a page goal. It's like what, am I going to write this scene or finish this chapter or revise, go back and do this. So yeah, I guess I have something finite in my mind, and that's a good thing because, a novel exists in time in the way maybe I used to write short stories. I love them. I don't know if your readers are, your
Mhm.
listeners
Yeah,
are
I have.
short story
Yeah.
people. And I think, parenthetically, that short stories are more like poems than they are
Mhm.
novels. I don't think one is the stepping stone to the other. But I have, in my youth, sat down and banged out a draft of a story, like in one sitting. It wouldn't be the final version, but I could do that. You can't do that with a novel.
Yeah.
You just can't. So you have to kind of allow it to exist in time, and that means that you have to have a different relationship to it,
Mm.
and getting you can't just sit down and finish it, although you would like to, because it's weighing on you, and you can't. So you have to integrate it into the rest of your life. I don't know of any other way around it.
I really love that phrase of letting it exist in time, and I think that I'm sure not all writers, but many writers that I speak to, we are impatient creatures, and I would like to have the book done by Tuesday after I think of it.
Right.
And we just
Yeah.
and because that's the way I do everything else. I do everything else as fast
Yes.
as I possibly can. And you can't do that with a novel. Are you more of a plotter or a fly by the seat of your pants kind of
I
person?
prefer fly by the seat of my pants because I
Mhm.
think when it goes well, I like the characters to kind of give me their, like, they get uppity, bossy. They say, I'm not doing that. I wouldn't do that. Like, what makes you think I would do that? But in the kind of trajectory of a writer's career, like I just sold another book to HarperCollins, and I sold it on
Congrats.
3 chapters and a synopsis. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I have to write it. Um, but because, like I have to give them something,
Mhm.
I have to write a synopsis, which is like the most tedious and unfun thing there
It's
is. Like sucking all the joy out,
I'm
right?
convinced that nobody likes synopses. Agents don't like them, editors don't like them, authors hate them. And I don't know about you, but when I have sold on synopsis, I write the synopsis, I believe in the synopsis, and then I start writing the book and it's just gone and we don't ever mention it again. I deliver a completely different book and
Right?
the editor never says, this isn't what you said because it couldn't be. I didn't know what the book wanted to be yet.
That's right. That's right. I found exactly the same thing. So
Yeah.
we share that, but nevertheless, you're made to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I guess I have like a general idea of where it's going.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
would rather not. I would rather just because I start with a voice.
Mm.
Like so I really like when it's going well, I feel like I'm not even writing it as much as transcribing it. That
Mm.
someone sort of like poked me and said, "Hey, I have to tell you something. It's really important, and like you're supposed to listen and get it down right." And I feel like I am more its um, conveyor than its originator.
I think
That's
I
an
have
apple.
never felt like that, and I've always wanted to. So maybe someday that
I
will
don't feel
happen
that
to
way
me.
all the time. It's like it's a brief incandescent moment,
Oh,
but I get a few of them here and there. And so if I'm starting with a voice, then the plot is kind of open, like I have an idea of like a situation that somebody might find herself in
yeah,
or himself. I've started with a few guys, not too many, but mostly women. But like then what? Like then they have to start talking to you and telling you.
yeah, yeah. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to writing?
Slowing down, like you, fast, fast. My grandpa used to call me schnell, schnell, which means fast in Yiddish, and I do, and I have to, like, I accept that I write many drafts,
Hmm.
many drafts. I have a friend, I have many friends who are writers, but one in particular I'm thinking of, Patricia Grossman. Shout out for Patty, whose first draft and final draft are much closer than mine, but
Mm-hmm.
she is such a controlled, measured, careful, kind of gorgeous writer in that way. And it shows like she doesn't have to do all those drafts because her process is slower. But mine is fast,
Yeah,
you know.
mine is fast and chaotic. Yes, that is exactly.
And I see like sometimes now I know this about myself. Like I set something up and I'm like really racing to get to the end, to get to the point. And then I might read it a few days later or somebody else points out to me like, you have missed a really good dramatic opportunity here.
Yeah.
You could, you could go back in and like, don't summarize this. Give me a scene here. Like, let
Yeah.
them be talking to each other. Let them be yelling at each other, whatever. Don't summarize.
Oh,
Let it
that's a
give itself.
very good lesson. Yes. What is your biggest joy when it comes to writing?
That voice,
Mm.
absolutely that voice. Like, I just feel like I am possessed by a spirit, and I wait for it.
You said that word incandescent, and your face kind of glowed when you said it too. That it just sounds marvelous. And but I want to go nitty gritty with it. How often does it happen? Does it happen once a year or once a week? I have no idea.
Okay, more than once a year, not as often as once a week.
Okay.
Somewhere in there,
Okay.
maybe certainly at the beginning, it's like what gets me going. Like
Yeah.
it was I think I need to write this book because somebody is telling me to write it. And then, I get glimmers of it and some days I get it,
And it won't.
like it's with me, and then other days um it's not. Dominic Dunn, it was not a novelist I necessarily admire very much, but I love this quote of his. He said, sometimes writing a novel is like laying pipe. And I think we've all felt that, right? Like sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you just have to get somebody from one point to the other, and there's a certain amount of information you have to give with that, and you just like have to do that. It's not very inspired, but
Yeah.
nevertheless, for the thing to hang together, you just have to do it. So
Yeah. And along
it's
with that pipe laying quote, I think of the Louis L'Amour quote, which I love it, which is start writing. The water doesn't flow until you turn the faucet on. And so in a
good
way,
one.
we're laying the pipe, we're turning the faucet on, and every once in a while you get that incandescent moment if you're
Yes,
lucky. And it won't happen if you don't show up for it, if you don't keep turning up.
that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Gorgeous. Can you share a craft tip with our writers of any sort?
Um, yes, I thought about that because I got your questions. I think when I'm writing a scene, I like to do a little checklist of the five senses. And
Mm,
I don't want to use them all in every scene because I think that would be really tedious. But I think for those kinds of, visceral details, like what is somebody smelling? Like possibly if that
mhm.
works. I mean, we tend to go for what they see and hear, characters see and hear. But what about like something that feels uncomfortable or scratchy or
Mhm.
soft and wonderful, or as I say, a smell or a taste? And it doesn't even have to be that they're eating food, but like maybe there's a taste in your mouth that's weird, and
Mhm.
like what's that? So I think those kinds of things. And after I've written something, I will go back and have that checklist in my mind and think, like, maybe I can offer a detail here, like using one of those sense details to bring this thing to life, because
Yeah.
because that is sort of how we apprehend experience, like all
Yeah.
the senses are working. We might not be thinking about all of them, they're not forefront in our minds, but yet they're all there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so good to be reminded of that because I think that as a writer, I'm always just a head in a jar, basically. I'm transporting thoughts around and I forget to put those feelings in. And I like that you think about all of them because you're really catering to all readers. If you drop in a few of each throughout the book or throughout the chapters, because I'm primarily driven, besides, sight, which most of us have many more receptors in our brains for sight than anything else if we are a sighted person. But after that, it's scent for me. I am a dog when it comes to scent. I can smell 7 things in this office right now. And when somebody writes about scent, it lights up that olfactory cortex in my brain and I can almost smell it. But other people wouldn't have that. They may be more sensory, touch driven. Do you agree?
I do. And right, it almost doesn't matter which one, because some are going to work better in certain instances, but they really do a lot to like bring your reader close in and
Yeah.
feel what your character is feeling.
Yeah.
So, and it's
Lovely.
easy. Like there are 5 of them, and you can kind of go through and spot like, okay, so like what's she feeling here, or what she's smelling, or what, we pretty much know what she's seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
That we're gonna, but let's bring the others in if we can.
Lovely reminder. Thank you. Can you share anything that happened in your writing career that has been mortifying in any way?
Yes, and this concerns our mutual agent because that is how I came to you, Susanna, who
Yeah.
I hope I've joked and said I've had one husband and like 7 agents, but I really hope she's going to be the last one, and she's younger than me, so
I love
it's
that.
like many years, so that's good.
Yeah.
So the first book that we worked on together was called Not Our Kind, and that's where when I became Kitty Zeldis. Though she was in there all along, but anyway, I became Kitty Zeldis officially. And she was really excited about the manuscript. And she said, I'm going to do a blitz. I'm sending it out to like 30 people. We're going to have a bidding war. It's going to be great. Nobody took it. No one. Zero. Nada. Nothing. It was really mortifying. Really.
And it goes to show that even agents who are excellent at their jobs, the publishing industry is so capricious. And
Yes, and that's right. And I asked her, I said, like, you didn't do this to be nice to me.
right, no,
You did
Susanna doesn't
this
do that.
No, and that
Yeah.
doesn't help anyone. You did this because you thought this manuscript was going to sell. Like, what were we missing? And she said, I don't know. I really don't know what happened. I was so sure that I was going to sell this on the first round. But in that case, enough people said the same thing about it.
Mm.
Like, look, this isn't this, didn't like that. And like when 4 or 5 people say that, and then one person, Emily Griffin at HarperCollins, said, if you change that thing, which basically was rewriting the second half of the book, like
Mhm.
scrapping what I had and just
Wow.
rewriting it, she said, I would look at it again. And Susanna said, I think you should do that. I think it's worth it to do that because several people have said it, and she's offered to read it again. And she even said, I'd like to read it on an exclusive basis.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was
So she was
so
real serious.
she was serious about it, and I can't say that I jumped on board right away. I moped around for a while. There were several weeks when I oscillated between reruns of Law and Order Special Victims Unit, right, and Modern Family. So they were like totally opposite ends of the pole. And I was, kind of whining and pouting. And I said to someone, my friend Jenny Fields, a wonderful novelist, and I have brought her to Susanna. Like that's like a connection I made. I feel really happy about. And I said, I can't do this. And she said, you just pull up your big girl pants and you can. And I don't know why that worked. Because like I thought, okay. And every day when I got to work, I'd say to myself, see, Jenny, I'm pulling up my big girl pants.
Oh,
And I did, and I rewrote it, and she bought it. So it
I
had to
love
have
that story.
that mortification. Yeah,
Also,
it was
it really goes to show that the community that we need, the writers that we need to surround us, those friends, because it just takes the one correct writer friend to say the one phrase that you didn't know you needed to hear to make you pull
exactly
up those pants and do it.
right. And that was just the thing that made me feel like, okay, I can do this. And I did it. And
What a
I do
great
think it was a
story.
better book for her. It was a big ask, but I think she was right in the end. So
I
it even
love
was
that.
that. It's not like I was forced to do something that I really didn't believe in.
Yeah.
I didn't see it at first, but when she explained to me, like, I think this novel is really about the relationship between these 2 women and this whole second half you have that involved a trial. She said that takes the focus completely off them. Like now they're kind of sidelined. And I want to see what happens when they do this,
Mm.
you know? Their employer employee, are they friends? You know, they become, it's complicated. And like she said, we want to stay there. And I thought, well, that's true. I do want that. So I did that.
And editors are good at their jobs. That's for a reason. That's lovely. Thank you. What is the kindest thing that anyone's ever done for you in your writing career?
Many years ago, well before Susanna, a friend of mine, when I was trying to um, get an agent for a novel that became my first published novel, a friend of mine, not a writer, but she was friends with a writer and had met this writer's agent, and she invited this agent over, like kept champagne flowing all evening, and at the end of the evening gave her the manuscript.
Oh, wow.
And the agent apparently said, God damn it, like everybody knew it was a manuscript from me, like my podiatrist, the cab driver, all right, just give it to me.
Yes, yes.
And she liked it and she sold it very nicely. So that was a very kind thing.
It's beautiful. I love that. And that agent's face, I could just imagine. What is the
But yes,
kindest thing that you've
another
ever
manuscript.
exactly. Well, we've all heard the story of literally agents being in the toilet and the manuscript being slid underneath the door at conferences, you know. Yeah. What's the kindest thing you've ever done for yourself as a writer?
That's a good question. What was the, I'm not even sure I know how to answer that. I guess it's a sort of not one kind thing, but like a kind of practice of kindness. Like some days the writing doesn't go well. Some days the voice is not anywhere in your vicinity, let alone in your ear. And you just have to forgive yourself and say, okay, this was not such a great day, but
Yeah.
like tomorrow's another day. I had a good day last week, like whatever, to just not like live in that um, disappointment or sense of failure.
Mhm.
That it's a long process, and
Yeah.
so yeah, and like remember that and say it's the aggregate that matters.
It's such a lovely gift to give yourself. That's beautiful. Thank you. Can you share what the best book is that you read recently and why did you love it?
I read a book called The Dig by Anne Bird, and this book, she's some years younger than I, but like I think she's 55 or 58. It's a first novel, and I've known her for a number of years. And I saw her like trying many things, and they didn't work. And this one, like one of those like I didn't want to get up until I finished it. And it's about
Oh,
the main character is a young woman from Bosnia whose parents have been killed, and she's adopted by these Americans, and she does a really, kind of tour de force in like inhabiting this person. I think it's fantastic.
speaking of writers and writing, will you tell us a little bit about the Dressmakers of Prospect Heights?
Yes, I would love to. It is right here. It
Such
is
a
a beautiful
gorgeous cover.
cover, isn't it? I
Yes.
had nothing to do with it, so I can like fell over it. Um, this book it kind of has two strands that I had to braid together like challah bread. One of them is New Orleans, which is a city I came to through my husband. He was a photographer, and we used to do a lot of road trips. And he wanted to go there with me, and he really wanted me to like it. And I think he was a little worried I wasn't going to like it. I loved it. I just love New Orleans. It's a very uh, what multicultural. It's a singular American city. I mean, you
Mhm.
got the French thing, you got the Cajun thing. There's Spanish, there's Italian. It's a fabulous city. Food, music, streets named Terpsichore and Arado. So like I was all in, and it kind of stayed on my radar. And when I was there, I learned that there was a period from either 1898 or 9, and maybe the law was enacted in 98. And it actually, I mean, it went into effect in 99, in which prostitution was legal. And the reason for this was not because they had some like Amsterdam type, progressive attitude towards sex workers. Not at all. The city was controlled by such vicious criminals who were involved in this industry that basically they felt the only way they could get a handle on it was to legalize it. So there was a 38 block radius in which this was legal. It was called either the District or Storyville after Edmund Story, whose idea it was to do this. And at that time, the train pulled into Basin Street. Came along Basin Street, the station, and that was the first street of this district. And it had on it mansions, one more splendid than the next, and they were brothels. in which the windows were filled with women in various states of undress, trying to entice the customers who are getting, guys who are getting off the train. So this became a big draw. And as you went further back from Basin Street, you got to less and less prosperous kinds of situations, and by the end of it, you'd find like a one-room shack called a crib with a half-naked woman sitting outside selling herself for 10 cents. I mean, that was what it was like. And so they decided to they came up with this directory, kind of like a yellow pages for the sex industry. And the big fancy brothels paid to advertise, but every single worker was listed. Every prostitute was listed. And they were listed by age and ethnicity and name. And so I saw one of them, it was called the Blue Book. At first it was sold, very quickly it was given away at the train station, at newsstands. And I saw some of these blue books in the historical, center, and what was it called? The Historical Society in New Orleans. And so one page is open and it says Caucasian 21 Jewish. This was a cattle prod to me. I thought, Jewish girl, prostitute in New Orleans? No one told me this story. I know a lot of immigration stories. My own family is Eastern European, Russian and Polish on one side, all Russian on the other. Like, I didn't know this story. I was very interested in this story, but I'm not a historian, so I didn't want to go look up that person and see what I could find about her. I wanted to invent her. I wanted to inhabit her. Like, what made her do that? Like, how did she end up as a prostitute in New Orleans, this Jewish girl? I mean, apart from the many women and girls, I'm not minimizing this, who were sold into slavery, sexual slavery by their parents sometimes, or, other people forced it. But there were also people who chose to do this. Why? What makes you do that? So I was like, I wanted to get in there and find out what made her tick. And sort of grafted onto that, or braided into that, to continue my challah metaphor, was my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who I lived until her mid-90s, and she was kind of an awful woman. I mean, fierce, tyrannical, small. My mother used to call her the tiny tyrant. And, prone to rages, and, somebody who harbored anger and I didn't want like any part of my grandmother, really. And especially as I grew older, she lived in another state. I could really keep my distance. I did that. And then she died. And as happens, I was about 45 when she died. That's like a long time to have your grandmother in your life, right? I was totally unprepared for the grief that I felt. And not just grief, regret. Like, I knew some of the basic outlines of her life. I thought, like, what was wrong with you? Why were you not more compassionate? She had a terrible, terrible life. And so I started writing about her, particularly her life in Russia. She was she came from Russia, and things that happened to her when she got here. And I think my writing about her was a way of apologizing to her and attempting to give her some of the agency and dignity I could not seem to do when she was alive. So she is in this book. Her early life is in this novel, because this imaginary this imaginary prostitute in New Orleans, this Jewish prostitute, I envisioned as a young Russian woman, forced out of Russia by the anti-Semitism that was rampant in those times. And her early life is absolutely, I took what things either my grandmother told me or I was able to glean from other people. And I found myself thinking, like, why hadn't I listened better to her? Like, she wanted to tell me things and I didn't want to hear them. I was like looking at my watch, looking around the room, and how can I get out of here? And the bare outlines of this, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that she was from a very assimilated and affluent family, which is not typical for Russian Jews in that period. And the source of this affluence was her father's profession as a tanner. It was a disgusting job, and Jews were allowed to have it because other people didn't want to do it. One of the chief components in the tanning process was urine. So we can imagine what it might have smelled like to go into a factory where this was happening. And her father so she described to me like a house, a very fine house with parquet floors and velvet drapes and crystal chandeliers. She spoke Russian at home, not Yiddish. She knew a little Yiddish, but that was very unusual. She grew up Russian speaking. And the sisters had dancing lessons. She had a big family, so the older sisters had dancing lessons and music lessons, and the boys went to a military academy. Again, young men in Russia, Jewish men, were not doing this. So my great grandfather's money must have provided an exception, like those boys were going to go. And then he was murdered in circumstances that no one really knows about. And that scene in this book, his body was delivered to their house.
Yeah.
After which, and this I did not use in the novel, she told me her mother took poison.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I remember the burns around her mouth. Quite a story, right? But she didn't die. So she rounded up the 4 or 5 youngest children. Many of the children were already older, married, had families of their own. She took the few youngest ones and she took them first to Riga. And before this, now the revolution has also come. And so she sells off like this house piece by piece. She goes out every day to sell, crystal and silver and rugs and whatever she can carry. And she gets enough money to take them first to Riga, which is a port city, and then to the United States. So I used all that. Now, I will say, we have to have some factual adherence here. My grandmother probably never went to New Orleans and certainly was never a prostitute or a madam, which is what happens to this.
But that is what you get to do as the fiction writer, as the novelist.
Right,
That's
right.
where you get to have the fun.
Right. So that's how I put this together. And
I love that.
I write about New Orleans, which I loved, and it let me kind of give my get my grandmother's story in print.
That's
somewhere.
beautiful.
And I wanted to have it.
And I had no idea that there was that history underneath, although it is very obviously impeccably researched, and I felt like it was all true. And at its core too is the whole mother-daughter story. In multiple ways. That's giving away nothing about anything. But that's always one of my favorite things to read. And I enjoyed the heck out of this book. And I thank you for writing it and for allowing me to read it. And I can't remember where we are in the process. Is it out now or is it coming out soon?
It's out. It's been out since December, and it will be out in paperback in September.
Fabulous.
Right now,
awesome.
It's this, but people like, and it's an audio-book, I guess, or an ebook, because everything is now. Right.
And that's all findable easily. Where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram as Kitty Zeldis, and I'm on Facebook as Kitty Zeldis. Nobody else has that name.
That's wonderful. It's a lovely, unique name that is completely easy to spell. So really, that's the lottery.
Okay, well, it is mine, and it's not mine. Zeldis is my maiden name. I have another name that shall remain not right now. But Kitty was a college nickname.
Oh.
And it was decided that I should use a pseudonym for this book. So like it didn't, and HarperCollins let me use Zeldis. Fine. And so cool. People were calling me Kitty for years, like a whole contingent of people, not my mother. But that's okay. My mother's the one who gave me the god-awful name that I have. I haven't quite forgiven her, but now that she's in her 90s and bedridden and mildly demented, I think it is time for you to forgive your mother for this. Like we should be thinking of forgiveness, right? That should be the dominant feeling here. But so Kitty felt like, I automatically look up when someone says it.
It's perfect. That's perfect. It has been a delight to talk to you. Thank you so much for being on the show, and I wish you the best and happy writing.
Thank you. Now you make me want to come to New Zealand.
You should. I will hold a room for you. Thanks, Kitty.
Okay. It's really, how many hours is the flight?
Oh, it's like 117 hours. It's like from New York, 15. Yeah.
15.
Not too bad. Yeah.
I don't think I could be in the air for 15 hours. I think I'd have to go someplace, stop, and then do
I mean, Hawaii, Fiji, Tonga, those are in between. Thank you so much, Kitty.
Okay, thanks a lot.